Hey everybody, I just realized that I did not do a video on Texas political parties. So I thought I better get one done. A little bit late at night, a little tired, but I think I can do this. I've got a PowerPoint to go along with it. Got some warm milk here. Microphone. So let me get to the shared screen and we'll talk about Texas political parties. Okay. There we go. All right, so there's the screen we're going to talk about. So the first thing we have to do is define what is a party. This obviously is the Texas delegation at the National Convention. You can always see them there. This is the Republican National Convention. They always wear the cowboy hats. So Texas is always a bit unique in that regard. So what is a party? Parties are groups of people who organize and they seek to control the personnel and policies of government. They want to control the government. And you control the government, obviously, by winning elections. So what are the functions of parties? Well, one, they recruit and nominate candidates. Parties are always looking for people to run for office. If you ever wanted to run for office, you probably could go down to your Republican Party headquarters or Democratic Party headquarters or Libertarian Party headquarters, whatever you wanted to do. And they would help you show you the ropes on how to register and what's some good campaign techniques. They try to educate people and simplify issues. Issues are often complex, and they try to educate you on the issues. And they allow voters to organize and express their opinions on past public policy. This is sometimes called retrospective judgment or retrospective voting. We usually vote on the past. So, for example, we got an election coming up here with in 2020, November 3rd, Trump versus Biden. If you vote for Trump, it's because you like what he's done in the past. If you don't vote for Trump, it's because you don't like what he's done in the past, because it's really hard to know what the future is going to be. They also help develop new policy, and this new policy is usually spelled out in what they call the party platform. Each idea in the platform is known as a plank. You put a bunch of planks together, you get a platform. They also act as watchdogs. They keep an eye on the other party and try to tell you of things they think they're doing wrong, or sometimes they even make up with things that they think they might be doing wrong. And the other thing is to generate excitement and mobilize voters. That's what a good campaign does. I mean, if you look at, I'd say the Obama election in 2008 energized campaign people. The Reagan election of 1980 energized people. Kennedy, 1960, energized people. So that's one of their goals. So, whoops, where did I go here? Here we are. Now, I'm going to compare our party system with the national party system. Nationally, we've always had two parties. We've always had a two-party system. I'm not going to go through the whole history of that, but it's usually been two parties. Our parties historically have been non-class, meaning you could be any kind of worker and be a member of that party. And until recently, been fairly non-ideological. I think you've seen a shift, particularly about the Republicans, about having a stricter ideology so to help them pass the bills that they want to pass. The American party system is highly elaborate, highly decentralized, meaning that there's all these different levels that we will talk about here shortly. And each level is basically autonomous. I'm tired. And they also have an extra legal status, which means that parties are not provided for by law, nor are they prohibited by law. Parties grew up because there was a need. People felt the need to organize. Even though the founders like James Madison feared what they called factions and parties, parties just tend to be a natural outgrowth. I mean, any organization you've been into, usually you go, look, I got to go change something. You got to go find other people to support you. And historically, parties have been pragmatic. Pragmatic is that they try to see what works. Now, Texas is a bit of an exception. It's usually been dominated by one party. It was the Democrats for almost 100 years. And then it was the Republicans in the 1990s till the present, and we may be shifting again. That's up for debate. But both of these parties will suffer from what we call intra-party tensions. There's groups within the party that causes conflict. This is sometimes known as bifactionalism, two factions. For the Republicans or the Democrats back in the time, you had liberal Democrats versus the conservative Democrats. And then for Republicans nowadays, you would have business Republicans, and then sometimes been referred to as Tea Party Republicans, but I tend to think nowadays a better description would be evangelical libertarians, not so much as Tea Party. So why two parties? Well, one of the reasons is what we call single member districts. And I may make a post from CPG Gray that explains this a little bit better, that you only get to elect one member of the legislative body, the Congress, the House of Representatives, the State House, or the State Senate. And this will trend you toward a two-party system. And that's coupled with what they call first past the post. That means that it's a plurality election. Whoever gets the most votes wins. And that makes it very difficult for third parties to get a foothold. But you should watch the video that I'll post after this one and be right after it. And now party organization takes this gets a little more complicated, which means I need to drink some more milk. Party organization has two parts to it. There's a temporary component, and the easy way to remember the temporary component is that it'll have the word convention after it. Convention is temporary. The permanent component usually has chair or committee after it. And if you look at this, this chart here, there's one of these, well, what the heck? There's one of these for each level of the party, for each party rather. There's one of these for each party. I was getting a bit confused because I was trying to think of what I was going to say there. If you look down on this screen, and we'll start off with a permanent organization. There's a precinct chair. There's two in your precinct. The precinct is the smallest voting unit. And so there's a Democratic precinct chair and there's a Republican precinct chair. I actually happen to know there's a Democratic precinct chair that's on my Facebook page. He volunteered. It's hard to get people to be precinct chairs because it doesn't pay anything. The job of the precinct chair, whether you're the Republican or the Democrat, is to get the vote out on election day. Remind people of the precinct to vote. If you need to give them a ride there, get them a ride there. Next up is what we call the county committee, and it's the county executive committee. It's made up of all the precinct chairs and a county, my brain took them, the county chairman, that's right. And these are the county chairman is elected by the party. Now, the county committee's job is really to plan that county convention, to do fundraising, and to help maintain a efficient county organization. Then when we go up to there, we go to the state committee. And remember, there's one for the Democrats and one for the Republicans. Each of the state committees, the Democratic one and the Republican one, has 62 members. That's one man and one woman from each of the state Senate districts. There are 31 state senators, plus a chair and a vice chair. And it's important to note that none of these positions are paid positions, that people volunteer their time to do it. And the state committee, its job is to really plan the state convention, fundraising, and trying to maintain an efficient state party organization. Now you may ask yourself, why would somebody do this for free? Well, these are political junkies. This is what they like to do. You're on the state committee, you get to hobnob with, governors and things like that, maybe presidents, and they love doing that sort of stuff. But trust me, it's overrated. But if you want to make a difference, it's a good way to make a difference. And then we're not going to talk about this in this class, but the next level would be the national committee. There's a national committee for the Republicans and the Democrats. Now, on the temporary organization, we'll go down to bottom, is the precinct convention. Now, the precinct convention is held on the day of the primary after the polls close, and it's open to anybody who voted in that party's primary. It's usually held about 7:30 at night, and it's at a library, a church, a school cafeteria, whatever, usually very sparsely attended. I attended one for each party in Kennedale. And actually, they had them in the same room, and they had just two tables, and there was like 3 people at each table. Pretty interesting. So what do they do at a precinct convention? Well, one of the things they do is they pass resolutions, ideas for laws that they want to see sent up the ladder. And then they also select delegates to go to the county convention, which is held about 2 weeks later. Now, if you look on this chart, it says county district convention. In some places, they go by senatorial districts because the counties are too sparsely populated. Now, the county convention held about 2 weeks later on a Saturday. It's pretty well attended, but they do a lot of the same things. They pass resolutions. So if you had a resolution passed at the precinct convention, it would move up to the county convention and voted there. And they select delegates to go to the state convention, which is the next stop for us. And the state convention is usually held in June, or and this is a little known fact, that the Canadians call June, this may shock you, they call it June. Who knew? I didn't know. Anyway, it's usually held in June or July, but of course, in 2020 with COVID, that's not seemed to be possible. The state convention, a little bit more difficult to get to, but it's people will go. I've had a couple students go because there's like a lot of balloons and a lot of drinking. It's like a faculty meeting, except we don't have balloons. But the state convention, it meets every 2 years. And what they do is basically create a party platform. And I talked about what that was earlier. And every 4 years, they select delegates to go to the national convention. And they also certify the offices for people who are running for governor and lieutenant governor. Now, from the state convention, there is a national convention, as there would be in 2020. But right now, with the COVID outbreak, that doesn't seem likely to happen either. Okay. Now, when I said that they were non-ideological, and this is changing, one is that there would be no litmus test, that you really could believe anything and be a member of either party. That's a little bit more difficult to do today. For example, if you want to be a Republican, take the issue of abortion, you have to be what they call pro-life. For Democrats, you have to be pro-choice, right? But both parties believe in representative democracy and free enterprise. So parties in the past used to be loose coalitions trying to appeal to a diverse group of citizens. I still think you see that in the Democratic Party. It may make it a little more difficult for them to govern. I think it was Will Rogers who once said, "I'm not a member of an organized party, I'm a Democrat." But for the Republican Party, I think it's become much more narrow focused in some states like Texas. But parties are open to anybody. You can join any party just by saying, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. That's all you have to do. There's no test, no interview, anything like that. Now, when I said they had an extra legal status, like I said, they're not provided for, they're not prohibited by law. The parties just grew out of a need. That's why we have them. So let's talk about the history of Texas parties. Now, our two-party system was only brief after statehood. There were some Whig Party members. They broke up over the issue of slavery, and Republicans were not strong in Texas. In fact, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln was not allowed on the ballot in any southern state, including Texas. The Republicans were seen as anti-slavery, and that wasn't popular in Texas. In fact, Sam Houston was a Unionist governor, and he got elected in 1859, and they kicked him out of the Civil War. They forcibly removed him from office because he opposed leaving. After the war, Texas was put under military rule, which we talked about in the last unit, and had its first Republican governor, E.J. Davis. But it was an experience that Texans didn't like. Some of it became much more exaggerated, but they were under military rule. And this effectively ended any chance for Republicans winning any major office in Texas. For a long time, people were known as yellow dog Democrats. In other words, you could bring out somebody who looks like Ryan Gosling and had all the education in the world and have all the experience in the world, but if he was a Republican running against, say, a big yellow dog, people would vote for the big yellow dog because the big yellow dog was a Democrat, and that's where the phrase yellow dog Democrat came from. So the Republican Party for almost 100 years is really ineffective in Texas. Now, Texas Democrats tend to be very conservative. These are not Democrats that you would recognize today. They were segregationists. They didn't want poor people and minorities to vote. They had this close tie to the business establishment, and they believed in this traditionalistic political culture, this idea that you should defer to your social betters. But again, the Democrats wound up dividing with what we call bifactionalism. This is known as an inter-party split, liberal wing versus conservative wing. And this is where liberals might embrace change, and conservatives tend to view change with suspicion. They prefer it very gradual. And a lot of this came about because of FDR and the New Deal. Beforehand, conservative Democrats certainly passed laws that prevented minorities from voting. They were anti-union people. They did not like a strong federal government. They didn't believe in a lot of social programs. And so here comes FDR during the Great Depression, who's also a Democrat, who wants to embrace minority voters, embrace unions, embrace all these other people, and have an expansive federal government, all things in which Texas Democrats, the conservative wing, did not like. There were liberal Texas Democrats that supported the young LBJ, James Allred, the only liberal governor we have in the 1930s. But this brings this split. So you might ask yourself, well, why didn't these conservative Democrats just join up with the Republican Party? Well, one, they hated the Republicans. They still did. Hated them with a passion. And two, all the voting laws tended to were in favor of the conservative wing, denying people certain people the right to vote that would normally vote for the liberal wing. So, as I said, they were unhappy with the National Democratic Party. They didn't like the New Deal. They were appealing, the National Party was appealing to people they didn't like, African Americans, Jews, labor unions, farmers. They didn't like that at all. And so, let's see if I can move my way down here. As I said, why not join the Republicans? I jumped way ahead of myself, I guess. Historical memories and voting laws favor the conservative Democrats, not the liberal ones. Here's our only liberal governor for 2 years, James Allred. There was all these inter-party battles. If you look at two of my favorite Texas names of all time, Homer Ramey and Buford H. Jester. I may change my name to that. It's just pretty cool. It was just really, they're both Democrats. It was just really nasty primary, accusing people of being communist and corruption. So, by the way, if you think nasty politics is something new, it's not. And what was weird about Texans is that Texans on a national level voted for Democrats. FDA, JFK, LBJ, who were very liberal, but in Senate and House and governor and state elections voted for very conservative people. The one exception was in that time period was Dwight Eisenhower. And that was a fairly easy one. Eisenhower's a war hero. Even though he's a Republican, they could get past that. He was born in Denison, Texas. And the governor at the time, Governor Alan Shivers, was mad at Harry Truman about drilling rights. And so he led Texas Democrats to support Eisenhower. In fact, they were known as the Shivercrats. And no, I did not make that name up. That was the actual name. Well, in 1960, actually 61, Texas had a vacant Senate seat. It's a vacant Senate seat because LBJ became JFK's vice president. He had been our senator. And so the Texas Democrats are split. There's a liberal wing and a conservative wing. It's a really nasty battle. And this allows for Republican John Tower, a political science professor, oddly enough, to win. He becomes the first Republican to win statewide office since E.J. Davis. So almost 100 years. That tells you something. John Tower went on to have a fairly distinguished Senate career, then died in a plane crash, unfortunately. And it's interesting is that this election had so divided the Texas Democratic Party that in 1963, LBJ asked John F. Kennedy to come down to Texas to try to heal this rift within the Texas Democratic Party. And of course, he's shot and killed in Dallas. So once he's shot and killed, Lyndon Johnson becomes president. Johnson doesn't really feel like he's the president because he got it because Kennedy's dead. He really wants to win this election in '64. And he runs against the very conservative Barry Goldwater. And by the way, Barry Goldwater conservative is not the same as Donald Trump conservative or Greg Abbott conservative. Changed fairly dramatically since the 1960s. And I don't have time to go into that. I do, but I'm really tired. Well, LBJ wins in a landslide. I mean, they wipe out the Republicans nationwide. I think Goldwater wins one state, one. But what happens here is the Republicans say, okay, enough of this. We're going to start using modern campaign tactics, direct mailing, better use of television, better fundraising techniques. And this ends up being very successful because if you go from after 64, the Democrats win in 64, Republicans win in 68, 72, 80, 84, 88. So, and then again in 2000. They dominate the presidency through this strategy. And of course, Nixon decided to adopt this Southern strategy. And this is important. There are a lot of people who say, well, and I see this a lot, is that, well, the Democrats were segregationists. That is true. Those were conservative Democrats. But they were so angry with LBJ and his civil rights movement that Nixon said, let's get those angry Democrats in the South and get them to vote Republican, and successfully did that. And so now you see Texas has been fairly Republican. Although there's some talk that in this 2020 election that Joe Biden's leading or neck and neck in the polls, but I would still probably bet on Trump in Texas at least. So in the 1970s, the Texas Republican Party said, we're going to run people everywhere, and we are going to start trying to win offices. And you know, originally they were, the number was less than 100, and today it's over 2,000 Republican elected officials in Texas. But in the late 1970s, Bill Clements becomes the first Republican governor since E.J. Davis, 100 years. He promises to run government like a business. He wins one term and then loses, and then comes back and wins a non-consecutive term as a Republican governor. And then we get to the 80s, we get Ronald Reagan, and this convinces a lot of other Democrats in Texas to shift parties. People like Rick Perry, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, a lot of your older Republicans in Texas were once Democrats. So today, they're dominated, the Republicans are now dominated by an inter-party split, as we talked about earlier. They hold all the statewide offices, over 2,000 county offices. But the question is, will Texas stay red, Republican, or will the demographic changes in Texas, as we talked about in Unit 1, make it Democratic? Or will it be purple, a mix of red and blue? It's uncertain at this time. And then that brings us up to the question of alignment or realignment. Realignment means that people are going to shift from one party to another, that you're seeing people moving from, say, the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, or in the 1980s, as we just talked about, people moving from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party? Are people making a party shift in Texas? Or are we seeing de-alignment? And de-alignment means that people are just moving away from parties in general, that they're maybe fed up with parties and they tend to vote more independently. And Texas looks like it's about a third Republican, third Democrat, and a third independent. Independents, although tend not really to be independents, they call themselves that. But when you look at their voting records, they tend to vote fairly strict along one party line. So funding parties. In Texas, as long as you're talking about a local office or a statewide office or a state office, you can give them as much money as you want. As mayor, if I was running and somebody goes, hey, Brian, I want to give you $1 billion for your campaign, they can do that. Now, a lot of people don't have a lot of money. And so what they'll do is they'll form political action committees. Political action committees are groups of like-minded people that pool their money together to give candidates so they can have a bigger impact. So for example, labor unions, corporations aren't allowed to give money. So what they do is they form a political action committee and donate it that way. So that's a brief history of parties. I'm going to try to get this posted tonight. And have it up for you. We're having, we'll also do a Zoom meeting review, which again, why do I tell you this? Because I can't use this video anymore because next semester I'll have to do it all over again and update it or it'll look really strange. But we will do another Zoom review for the next unit. And I would encourage everybody to do it. But remember to please follow up and watch the video on the two-party system. So that's it for tonight. I think my warm milk is getting a little bit cold. So keep watching the videos.